Hey, it's me! Welcome to my channel. Today, we are answering the question, what happens when you play horror in complete darkness? If that sounds like a video you'd like to see, hit like and let's get into it. It has been well documented that playing scary games in the dark is an optimal way to increase the fear response. There are plenty of videos online showing people screaming and freaking out while playing games like Outlast or Five Nights at Freddy's with all of the lights turned off. But what if we take things to the next level and turn off the lights in our entire house? I mean, if playing a scary game in the dark is more frightening, then surely playing one in total darkness would be even worse, right? Well, not necessarily. When you remove all sources of light, your eyes don't actually see anything. They just interpret visual input from outside of their range of perception. Basically, your eyes tell your brain that there's still stuff out there, but they can't make out any details. And since the brain hates ambiguity, this can cause some pretty unpleasant feelings. So, how do we tackle this? The first step is to pick a game. Since I already knew this was going to be a very challenging experience, I wanted to choose something that was both scary and relatively easy to beat. The last thing I wanted was to get stuck on a challenging part, because I was too afraid to look for hints or read instructions. I settled on Layers of Fear, a psychological horror game where you explore a constantly shifting Victorian mansion. Since the game is all about building a creepy atmosphere rather than jump scares, I thought it would be a good fit for this experiment. Also, I had already beaten the game once before, so I knew the ending wasn't too far off. I found a spot on the floor where I could comfortably set up my gaming laptop and hooked everything up. My room was completely empty. No furniture, no decorations, nothing. Just a blank canvas of painted drywall. The only other things present were my bed in the corner and a closet across from me. I didn't bother putting a blanket over my bed or closing the closet door because honestly, I wouldn't have been able to tell. Then I cracked the door open and turned off the lights. With everything set up and ready to go, I popped in my headphones and launched the game. Immediately, I realized that this was going to be harder than I expected. Without any visual references, my brain couldn't tell whether or not I was sitting down or standing up. It took a few seconds, but eventually, I got used to it. Still, it felt incredibly strange and slightly nauseating to exist in a 3D space without being able to tell which way was up or down. I mean, I could obviously feel myself sitting on the floor, but it wasn't the same as actually seeing the floor underneath me. But I pressed on and made my way into the game. I've played Layers of Fear several times before, so I kinda knew what to expect. But that doesn't mean it was any less creepy. The game takes place in the mind of an insane painter named Francis, and the player character is essentially Francis's subconscious. As you wander around the house, you can gain insight into his past by reading letters, diaries, and newspaper clippings, as well as by listening to audio logs. There are some very effective jump scares in this game, but fortunately, none of them rely on visual cues. You can hear doors slamming shut and objects shattering nearby. Also, there's a woman who periodically appears in the hallway outside of your field of view. She never gets too close, but you can hear her footsteps drawing closer and closer until she disappears again. Since sound travels through the air, I could definitely hear her getting closer, but I couldn't tell how close. The audio in this game is so good that I found myself instinctively flinching whenever I heard a loud noise. And there were plenty of loud noises. For example, sometimes you get startled by an unseen presence. In these instances, your vision would start to glitch out, accompanied by a loud, drawn-out scream. These parts were genuinely terrifying, but since I knew the game was only about an hour long, I was able to push through them. If something had grabbed me from behind, I probably would have screamed too. As time passed, I slowly started to notice shapes beginning to form in front of me. At first, it was nothing distinct. It was more like looking at a blank wall and seeing random shapes in the paint. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the edges of objects began to appear. It was almost like turning on night vision goggles. The room was full of shades and silhouettes. The computer screen in front of me looked like a giant black rectangle with the faintest outline around the edges. The outline of the closet door across from me was always visible, but now I could also make out the detail on the wood, such as the grooves and ridges. The closet above me, the bed beside me, and the window above the bed were all visible as well. At this point, I felt like I had achieved a sort of mastery over the darkness. I could tell which direction everything was facing and where each object was located in relation to me. So I continued playing until I reached the climax of the game. In order to finish the game, I needed to enter the closet. This wasn't really made clear through gameplay, but I had played the game before, so I knew that this was the final challenge. As I walked up to the closet, the game began to glitch. The scene faded to static and the audio started to distort. Then the closet door flew open. Of course, I jumped and nearly fell over. I knew the door was going to open, but I didn't know when. Would it slam open as soon as I walked up to it, or would it stay closed until I actually stepped inside? Evidently, it was the latter. Then the screen went black and the audio cut out entirely. I could still hear the breathing and heartbeat sounds from earlier, but now they were very faint. Also, I could hear the sound of my own voice echoing in the darkness. That was weird. Then I started to hear shuffling sounds coming from inside the closet. I couldn't tell exactly where they were, but they seemed to be moving around inside the closet. Whatever was in there was dragging its feet along the floor and occasionally banging into different objects. Since the closet door was open, I could see a silhouette of whatever was moving around inside. The creature was hunched over with sharp, jagged protrusions sticking out of its back. The shuffling sounds continued for a few seconds, then abruptly stopped. Then I saw the shape move slightly and it looked like it was kneeling down. To be honest, I don't really remember much after this. I think I screamed. I don't know. Maybe I should mention that prior to starting this experiment, I asked my neighbors to call the police if they heard screaming or commotion. I didn't think it would come to this, but I was getting pretty scared. Anyway, I don't remember much after that. I think I screamed and maybe even panicked for a moment, but I was able to calm myself down. After a few seconds, the shuffling sounds started again, but now they were coming from directly outside the closet. I could hear them in front of me on the other side of the doorway. The sound grew louder, and then the closet door slammed shut. Now, the only light in the room was coming from the computer screen, so I could only see the closet door as a dark silhouette against the light. Then the shuffling sounds started again. They were coming from inside the closet. They moved closer and closer until they were right on the other side of the door. Then I heard a crash, and the shuffling sounds stopped. A few seconds passed in silence. Then the closet door swung open again. And finally, the game ended. I was greeted with a cutscene showing the main character emerging from the closet, having overcome his inner demons. Naturally, I felt a huge sense of relief wash over me. I mean, it wasn't like I was in any real danger, but it still felt great to finish the game. After that, I spent a few minutes looking around my now familiar room to make sure I had missed anything important. I'd actually played quite well, despite the circumstances. All that was left to do was exit the game, unplug my laptop, and turn the lights back on. Now that the lights were back on, I noticed that my room looked very different. The white walls seemed darker than before, and the furniture looked kind of unfamiliar. It was like visiting a location you've been to before, but under drastically different conditions. But it did make me realize just how accustomed I had become to the darkness. After only an hour or so, I had managed to adapt to the pitch-black environment. And although it was pretty unsettling at first, I was able to adjust and even overcome some of my fears. I guess the saying is true that you can't see in the dark, but what you can't see doesn't mean that you can't be seen. If you enjoyed this video, check out another one of our recent uploads. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel.